Thinking about death can make your life better. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Well, as always, I encourage teenagers and parents to listen together. But this episode, especially, I think there's a lot of good stuff to discuss together. And just as a reminder, if you want to watch, if you aren't satisfied just to listen, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. You can even subscribe to be notified. I think, to be honest, I don't use YouTube a lot, but I think you can subscribe and it will tell you when new episodes are out. We do have new episodes out every Monday and Wednesday morning. Those are our full-length episodes, and then Friday we have our pointed episodes. And if you want to leave a comment on YouTube, I will do my best to look at those. And especially if there's a question or a comment about one of the topics that we've had, please let me know. I'd love to respond to listener thoughts or questions. And if you ever want to email the show, sharpeningarrowspodcast@gmail.com. sharpeningarrowspodcast@gmail.com. All right, last week, Dr. James Dobson passed away, went home to glory. He's now worshiping in heaven. He was the founder of Focus on the Family. If you have grown up in a Christian family, almost certainly you or someone you know has been blessed by the ministry that he started. Again, that's Focus on the Family, from the radio show to books on raising kids to Adventures in Odyssey. That is a lifesaver in my house. Dr. Dobson had an incredible impact on Christians, on non-Christians, on America. And as you look back at his life, there's a few lessons I would like to share from it that I think are worth consideration. Now, before we do that, because this show is a little bit about debate, it's a little bit about finding the arguments on both sides. I think the question that is raised is this: can a teenager learn anything from Dr. Dobson's life? Now, the bigger version of this question is simply this: can you learn something from someone who's not very much like you? And we will start, of course, with arguments for the wrong side. And when we get through the arguments, I do actually want to share some things that I think are really valuable from Dr. Dobson's life. All right, arguments against the idea that you can learn from people who were not like you. All right, number one. Well, Dr. Dobson was nothing like me. At the very least, if you're a teenager, Dr. Dobson was certainly not a teenager at this stage of his life. He was in his 80s. He was from a different generation. And depending on who you are, Dr. Dobson was a white man. That means he may not look like you. His lived experience may not be anything like yours. Oh, that lived experience phrase, that is everywhere these days. And so there's simply nothing that he or his life could have taught me because he's not like me. Therefore, I can ignore him safely. There's nothing to gain. Argument number two, well, teenagers are supposed to be establishing an identity away from their parents. That's a natural part of growing up. In fact, we want teenagers, or whether we want to or not, they're certainly going to go on a journey of self-discovery. They're going to find out who they are, what their interests are. So let's have a pause point right there. What's a way, teens, that you are different from your parents? And what's a way that you are similar? Now, this is from the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. So teens, you can get a little insight into what parents are learning about, what we're thinking as teenagers grow up. This is their insights on middle adolescence, ages 14 to 18. Teens begin to imagine their own adolescent identity and role in the larger world. They're actively exploring adolescent identity alternatives, trying on different hats to see which one fits best. They're starting to consider themselves and their beliefs in relation to broader social cultural groups like gender, race, and religion. They're taking stronger stances on social, ethical, or moral issues. And there's an increased awareness in how they see themselves across different places and social groups. You see, teens are doing this. I'm guessing if you're a teenager, you may recognize some of those things. If you're a parent of a teenager, I'm most certain you recognize some of those things. So why would we go and learn from someone who's in his 80s, who lived in a different generation? I need to go out there and discover for myself what I really believe. Well, as you ponder those thoughts, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Now, whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Now, as every parent knows, raising teenagers can feel like a roller coaster. There are moments of joy and excitement to moments of deepest concern and worry. Combine that with the busyness of life, and this up and down can leave you feeling overwhelmed and even isolated. As the mom of 4 busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand, and it's why she created Mama Bear Prayers, to support moms who are on the journey of raising kids. God works through prayer. So check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, so let's take on these arguments. Remember, there are some lessons from Dr. Dobson's life that I think are really interesting, are really valuable, are worth sharing. But instead of just sharing them, I wanted to talk about this idea of, is it worth learning from other people? Because if you're not open and interested, there's really little point in sharing what we can learn from Dr. Dobson's life. So let's look at these arguments, these wrong arguments. One, the idea that, well, Dr. Dobson, he's not my age. He may not look like me. He's from a different generation. What do I have to learn from him? Well, my response would be that truths are universal. We talked about this a lot on one of our first episodes, Does Truth Exist? If you didn't listen to it, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. Yeah, it's really a foundational episode where we dive into this idea of does truth exist or is it relative? And conclusion, that truth does exist. And if it does, then we can learn from others because there's things that they have experienced that we also can relate to because everything isn't relative. Think about it this way. It's good to learn from mistakes. It's better to learn from someone else's mistakes. So let's have a pause point right there. Have you ever avoided a bad outcome because you saw and learned from someone else's mistake? I hope so. And as a parent, I hope my kids learn from the mistakes that I made, because mistakes can be really painful. And it's a lot better off if you can avoid them and learn from someone else's. All right, let's look at this. Let's look at this argument number 2. This argument number 2 is that teenagers are establishing an identity apart from their parents. So why would they be looking for lessons from someone that their parents are learning from? Now, as we start, I would like to acknowledge that it is true that teenagers are looking to develop an identity away from their parents. And in some respects, that's absolutely healthy. You are not your parent. You are not a mini version of your parent. My children are especially grateful for that. But just because you're creating your own identity, you're seeking to find out, what am I really interested in? What do I really believe? Remember, that's one of the reasons this podcast exists, is to create a place for parents and teens to talk about these issues. And teenagers, remember, you don't have to agree with your parents. You don't have to agree with me. We want you to explore these issues. We want you to understand that there are good arguments for bad ideas, not necessarily correct arguments, but good arguments. So we do want that. But just because that process is going on doesn't mean that truth no longer exists or that you can avoid consequences for bad decisions. And in fact, teenagers, what I would encourage you to do is turn this around. Because if you're aware that as a teenager, oh, my natural tendency may be to push away from my parents, then you've got to think and you've got to ask yourself, is my response here, is that just a reflexive push away from my parent, or is my response here what I actually believe? Because when you know you have a weakness, when you know you have a reflexive response of, oh, that's from my parent, I just, it's my parent, it's not me. Then you really got to take an extra step and make sure that your belief or your action is correct. And if you go to the grade 8, remember those are the questions we're putting in our toolbox. This is really question number 7 here. Am I focused on the speaker or the argument? Because when I was a teenager, when your parents were teenagers, we all went through it, right? Something our parents said and it just didn't sit right with us because it was from our parents. And so I'm challenging you to take the step and to really think when you have that reaction, you have to think, do I actually disagree with this, or am I just trying to assert my independence? And let me give you a couple of analogies here. You may have noticed my skin is very pale, and it probably doesn't surprise you to find out that I sunburn very easily. I remember once I went to an ultimate frisbee tournament. I put sunscreen on my legs continuously. I still ended up getting my legs very sunburned. I was very frustrated by this. But my skin is more likely to burn. And so I have to take more steps than other people to prevent getting a sunburn. That's just the way it is. And because I know that I have a tendency to get sunburned, then I can take extra steps. And so what I'm encouraging you to do is, if I know that a natural part of being a teenager is to seek my own identity away from my parents, if I find myself disagreeing with my parents, am I really disagreeing with them because I have a disagreement on the merits, or is it just because it's coming from my parents or another authority figure? Now, there's more at stake here than simply avoiding mistakes. One of the wonderful things about learning from other people is that you can achieve more. If you've ever heard this expression, standing on the shoulders of giants, what it means is we don't have to make all of the discoveries about science, about math, about human nature, about God. We don't have to make them all over again. We can stand on the shoulder of giants, the giants who've gone before us, and learn from them. And there is no one who's going to be more invested in your life than your parents. And so I am encouraging you to learn from your parents. And another reason it's important to learn from those who've gone before us is that as a teenager, you simply don't know what it's like to be 25, 35, 45. You don't know how people change. You don't know how priorities change. And so it's of great value to learn, well, what happens to people generally when they're 25? What happens generally at 35? How can I prepare myself to be happier at 25 than I am today? And sometimes there's a trade-off between what makes me happy in the moment and what makes me happy years in the future. All right, so, wow, that is a really long intro into saying I hope that you are willing to listen and learn some lessons from Dr. Dobson's life. And the tagline of this show is, we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. Obviously, we do a lot of politics on this show. We're going to continue doing a lot of politics on this show. But this is a lesson with hopefully some life lessons. So let's have a pause point right here before we dive in. Have you ever been called to do something by the Lord, but you haven't been sure why? Here's the first lesson from Dr. Dobson's life. Our job is to be faithful to God, and God's job is to see the big picture. Our job is to be faithful to God, and it's God's job to see the big picture. You see, the story of Dr. Dobson wouldn't have existed without the story of Dr. Dobson's father. Dr. Dobson's father was an evangelist growing up, and he was an extremely successful traveling evangelist. And so he was on the road, and he would go and he would preach at various churches. But there was a problem. Dr. Dobson, as he was a teenager, when he was 16, he was testing the waters with his mom, and his mom called his dad and told Dr. Dobson's dad that his son needs him. And this is how Dr. Dobson described it later. Now, I want you to think about this from the perspective of Dr. Dobson's father. Here he is. He's a successful traveling evangelist. He's serving the Lord. He's going and preaching the gospel. He has 4 years of meetings lined up. Can you imagine how successful you have to be to have 4 years of meetings booked? And here's his son acting up, acting a fool. And he knows, wow, my first responsibility is to my family. So I'm going to go home. I'm going to take, basically, kill my career. I'm going to go be the pastor at a small church in order to be with my son and to set my son straight. Now, just think about how that would have felt at the time. Let's have a pause point. What do you think Dr. Dobson's father felt about his professional prospects? Well, I know how I would have felt. I would have felt very discouraged. I would have felt like, hey, God, you've raised me up, you've trained me, you've opened all these doors, and now I have to go preach at a small church and be there for my son? That's what you have for me? But we know the rest of the story. We know that faithful service to his family helped bring Dr. James Dobson back to the Lord, back to the straight and narrow, and what was behind the creation of Focus on the Family that has reached hundreds of millions of people. And it started with Dr. Dobson's dad being faithful to God by being faithful to his family. And I think that's important. It's important perspective, because there are going to be lots of times in your life when you're not going to understand why God wants you to do something. Well, why am I doing this, Lord? And that person over there, maybe they have success or money or fame. But why did you call me to this small role? And we aren't always going to know the answers. But one lesson we can learn from Dr. Dobson's life is to be faithful to God, and it's God's job to see the bigger picture. Lesson number 2, God can use your excellence, obviously done with the gifts that God has given you through his strength, to open unexpected doors. And what I think we see a lot through history, what I think I've seen in my own life, is that often God opens unexpected doors so that he gets the glory. Paul becomes the great missionary. The man who persecuted the church becomes the one who God uses to spread the gospel throughout the Roman world. God gets the glory. I will say this in my own life. My worst subject was English. And here I am, a professional writer. God gets the glory. I can claim no credit for that. And we see this in the life of Dr. Dobson. Dr. Dobson did not start out thinking, I'm going to create an institute for the family that's going to help hundreds of millions of people. He went to Pasadena College to study psychology. He earned a doctorate at the University of Southern California Medical School. And he did academic research at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. He even oversaw a $5 million study of dietary treatment of children with a rare genetic disorder that caused developmental disabilities. And he wrote multiple scientific articles and a textbook. Wow, that's an impressive career right there. And then he felt the calling of the Lord to do something to help families. But get this. He wouldn't have been in a position to write a book on discipline and helping families uh, helping parents be better parents, strengthening families. He wouldn't have been in that position if he hadn't have if he didn't use the gifts that God had given him. If he didn't succeed academically, he never would have been in that position. And I think there's a takeaway there. Do the best you can for the glory of God, and be open for God to open unexpected doors. Third lesson from Dr. Dobson's life: don't lose sight of the goal. This is what Dr. Dobson wrote before he died. I've concluded that the accumulation of wealth, even if I could achieve it, is an insufficient reason for living. When I reach the end of my days, a moment or two from now, I must look backward on something more meaningful than the pursuit of houses and land and machines and stocks and bonds, nor is fame of any lasting benefit. I will consider my earthly existence to have been wasted unless I can recall a loving family, a consistent investment in the lives of people, and an earnest attempt to serve the God who made me. Nothing else makes much sense. So think about this. Here's a guy. He has fame. He sold millions of books. I assume he has money. He knew presidents. He has power. And what does he say brings meaning? A loving family, a consistent investment in the lives of people, and an earnest attempt to serve the God who made me. Well, you know what the great news is there? That's available to all of us. We can all love our family. We can all serve other people. And we can all seek after God and seek to serve Him. What a wonderful statement of purpose and vision. And teenagers, I would encourage you to have a part in this. Enjoy these moments with your parents. Serve joyfully in your family. Now, of course, that's a little self-serving because I would like my own children to serve joyfully with the family, and I'm grateful when they do. But these moments, as a resident of your parents' home instead of a guest in the future, that they're fleeting, and enjoy them. All right, so let's have an exit question here. When you die, and it's going to happen to all of us, what are 3 ways you want to be remembered? And what is one change you can make today to bring yourself closer to that goal? All right, we'll get back to politics on Wednesday, I promise. But I think Dr. Dobson has some really incredible lessons for us all. And there's a lot more to life than politics. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. And I'd also encourage you to share it with your friends and Christian community. Stay sharp and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.